back to New England on a 1-year deal. It's the Patriots Beat live edition with Alex Barth and Evan Lazar. And Alex, I got to say, I'm a little frustrated, and I'm not frustrated at the Patriots. I'm actually frustrated about the reaction that I have seen both on my Twitter feed, on the airwaves, to a deal that is essentially a 1-year, $5 million contract that originally got reported as a $14 million contract, which was not entirely false, but also not entirely an accurate portrayal of what the deal was. But what I'm mostly frustrated about is this sense that everybody is claiming that the Patriots don't have a plan at the quarterback position. There's no plan, right? Cam Newton's not a plan. None of this is a plan. We are sitting here on March 12th, and the NFL draft is April 29th, right? And we don't know if they have any intentions to move up in the draft. We don't know if we have any intentions to make a trade for a veteran quarterback on draft weekend if another teams are draft a quarterback and somebody else comes available. I think that the overreaction to this move is obviously based off of what we saw out of Cam Newton last year, but I don't think it's an accurate representation of the deal that they just gave him or the situation that they are in. The deal that they just gave him is backup quarterback money. It's backup quarterback money at best, right? This is a prove it 1-year deal for Cam. And let's see what they do in the draft. If we're talking on this show right after the draft weekend, Monday after the draft, and they drafted Jamie Newman in the 4th round, then we can be mad. Then we can get angry. But until then, I feel like we're overreacting to this contract.
So what bugs me about the contract, I don't think I'm as mad as some people are. And I tweeted this morning as a joke, that paying Cam Newton $14 million is certainly, by definition, uncharacteristically aggressive. Now, I understand they're not paying him $14 million. If they do, it means they won the Super Bowl. He won MVP. It's worth the money. It's the concept that for years and years, the Patriot way meant, you got paid your value. They didn't overpay for players. They didn't give players new deals that didn't earn them, etc. Right? The not the base, but the overall number of the contract, which is $14 million, is double the overall number of last year's contract, which is $7 million. The base number, right, the guaranteed, is more than double what it was last year. So I don't know that I wouldn't say I'm mad. I guess my question is, what did you see from Cam Newton last year, if you're the Patriots, that you felt he earned to have his salary doubled? That's my question. And if it was about competition, who was the other team that was pushing you where you needed to double Cam Newton's salary to get him back in the building? That's my question. I understand the contract itself is swallowable. You just talked about the approach, right? What's the plan? What are they going to do in the draft? The fact they doubled his salary is what's kind of stopping me from getting excited about looking ahead. They didn't just bring the guy back. They rewarded him for his performance last season. They gave him a pay raise.
Him for his performance.
They gave him a pay raise. And by performance, I mean all around performance. And some of what he did, the way he handled himself with the media, the way he handled himself with teammates, that deserved a reward. And maybe that's the answer to the question. I'm not sitting here like asking that question, berating them. This is just the question I had. Why did his salary double? Is it because they truly believe in him as a football player, or is it because they truly believe in him as a person? And that, I guess, goes back to what you said and leads us into a next question. Is Cam Newton back because he's going to be the bridge and they think he can be the teacher, whether it's Lance, whether it's Wilson? I think it has to be one of those, the top 3 guys. Take Lawrence out, the top 3 guys that aren't going number 1. Is he here because he's going to be the bridge and the teacher to that guy? Or is he here because they believe it was a rough offseason and he came in July and they can fix the mechanical issues and they can turn him back into Cam Newton? Is that why he's here? That, to me, is the question that we don't know. And we won't know until after the draft. And what the next month and a half is basically going to be is fighting the urge to overreact. A lot of people are losing that fight right now. But that's what the next month and a half is going to be. So those are the questions. Why is he back? If there's something to be like, I'm not mad about any of that. I know my tone isn't great, but those are just the questions.
Yeah.
If you want to be frustrated about this, so I'll give the naysayers and the doubters, and I try, you know me, I always try to keep it positive. If you want to be frustrated about something here, it's the fact it got to this point. And I've said this, right? Why did it have to be Cam versus Stidham last year? Why did it have to be Cam versus Jimmy this offseason? It should have been, why aren't there better options? And Brady signing his extension today just kind of twists that knife. That's where the frustration should be.
I think that's crying over spilt milk. I get it.
It is. No, you're right. It is. But I'm saying, if you want to be frustrated, that's it. Cam Newton got himself a contract and got himself another chance. There's nothing wrong with that. And if they think that he can be the teacher for the next guy they're going to bring in, there's nothing wrong with that either. I don't think it's a horrible plan. That's not the money. All of that is not worth getting mad about.
Yeah, I think that you hit the nail on the head there with the two kind of paths in the road here, the split in the road, right? To the right is, we think that Cam had COVID last year. He had nobody to throw to. You know, before COVID, he looked a lot better than he did after COVID. And we think if we get the player in weeks 1 and 2 for the duration of the season, then he can be a much better. And they're selling themselves on Cam as a quarterback option moving forward. That, I think, is a path that they should not go down. But if they're going to go down the path of pairing Cam as a bridge, as a veteran stopgap, whatever you want to call it, a season starter with a Trey Lance, with a Justin Fields, even with the Mac Jones. I know we're going to talk a little bit in a little bit about how that's a little bit of a weird pairing, but even a Mac Jones, then I can sell myself on that path. So if they're going to go right and they're going to go towards drafting a first-round quarterback and having Cam be there as the veteran bridge, then that's one thing. If they're going to go down the road of, we're just going to load up on weapons or try to load up on weapons, and we believe in Cam and this, that, and the other thing, then I'm right there with you that I think that's a road that they should not be traveling. Now, how we got here, I don't want to look all the way back to the Brady offseason.
Look, I don't want to have that conversation either. I'm just saying that I see a lot of people mad at Cam, and that's not what this is. The guy had a chance to keep playing football and make money in a place he likes to be. Cam is at no fault here. People are acting like he tricked the Patriots or something into giving him this contract. Cam's not at fault here. Cam's going to come, and you know what? Say what you will about Cam Newton. The guy's a gamer, right? The guy wants to win. If he comes in and succeeds, that is going to be the coolest thing. All right? Like Patriots fans should be rooting for him 100%. This is not a tank thing. They're not going to win 2 games. Like, they'll win with Cam Newton. They might not make the playoffs. They'll win enough games, where it's not a tank, but this is not getting mad at Cam Newton. He's a gamer. He's going to come in. He's going to compete his ass off, whether he's competing for the starting job or not. He's going to play his ass off. I don't think you shouldn't be doubting. The issue is not Cam Newton. The issue is the circumstances where the Patriots were left with Cam Newton. So I'm not saying that. Look, I don't want to rehash the last 2 offseasons.
Let's rehash this offseason, though, because I think it's important to talk about how we got back here. We know how we got here in the first place, right? Last offseason, but how did we get back here in this position? I think the main thing that you looked at is that the quarterbacks that moved were Matthew Stafford and Carson Wentz. Matthew Stafford, they did not have the trade package that Detroit was looking for. Detroit wanted a quarterback in Jared Goff that could start games for them right away. The Patriots didn't have that guy. They didn't have it in Jared Stidham, so they didn't have that option. So the only option that they could have done to acquire Matthew Stafford was traded 3 first-round picks or 4 first-round picks or something crazy like that to Detroit for Matthew Stafford. I think we can all agree that would have been stupid, right? So then the next step was Carson Wentz. I mean, I guess you could have talked me into that deal for Carson Wentz, but really the best landing spot for Wentz to save his career was to go back to Frank Reich in Indianapolis. And then there's the Jimmy G thing. And the Patriots did call on Jimmy G. I reported this earlier today. They tried to kick the tires on Jimmy G. And basically what happened was that the Patriots and the 49ers had 2 different timelines. The Patriots wanted to get a veteran quarterback signed and on the roster before free agency starts next week. And the 49ers wanted to hold on to Jimmy G until the draft to make sure that they had a better option before they pulled the plug. And that didn't line up for both sides, right?
So here's my question about that, just real quick. If I'm the Patriots, was there an offer that makes San Francisco expedite their timeline? Like, this is something that's bugged me about the Celtics for a long time. I think Danny Ainge won't make deals because they're good deals, but they don't fall into the window he wants to make them. And I'd hate to see the Patriots become that. So could they have overpaid a little bit to get the deal to line up with their timeline? Did they choose to do that or not? The flip side of it is I'd like to see, right, they're competing with San Francisco probably for the fourth quarterback of that top four group. Lawrence, Wilson, Lance, and Fields, right? It's probably down to them in San Francisco if you're trading up for the fourth guy. They screwed you with Jimmy in the timeline. I'd like to see the Patriots come back with a vengeance and make sure that I know right now it's 12-15, San Francisco, then New England. I'd like to see Bill come back with a vengeance. And if the plan is to trade up, do not let John Lynch pick ahead of you in this draft.
So the biggest obstacle for the Patriots with Jimmy G, I don't think was necessarily the return on the trade. I think they could have made it worth San Francisco's while. The problem was that Jimmy G has a really hefty contract right now. And
that's a contract worth getting mad about.
Right. My understanding is that Jimmy G was willing to rework it, but he wasn't willing to drop it below starter money. Right. He was still going to want to make $20+ million a year. And I think the Patriots were hesitant to give him that, especially, by more so in the fact that I think Jimmy has grown a little bit frustrated with things in San Francisco that they won't stay committed to him, right? He reads all these things in the media. He reads all these things about how, they're more interested in Darnold or they're more interested in this draft quarterback. And Jimmy, I don't think is really thrilled with that. And so I do think that there is an opportunity there to still slide in and get Jimmy Garoppolo back here in New England. But again, the Patriots were dead set, and Mike Reese had this report a while ago as well. The Patriots were dead set on finding a quarterback, a veteran quarterback, to sell free agents on in the offseason. And I don't know if Cam sells Kenny Golladay to come here. I don't know if he sells Hunter Henry to come here necessarily, but it's at least a little bit more cash than somebody like Jared Stidham, right? It's a little bit more, negotiating power or recruiting power, I should say, than somebody like Stidham. So it's not the best solution, but again, it's something that I think that they felt important. It was important for them to do. And when Jimmy G's timeline didn't line up. Similarly, I don't think Gardner Minshew or those types of quarterbacks timelines were lining up either for the Patriots to make those trades. But I don't think that this Cam contract and this Cam deal completely takes them out of that market, right? I think it probably should, because at this point, like I said at the beginning of the show, I'd much rather them commit down that road of Cam's the bridge and we're going to draft a quarterback and we're going to do that long play it here. But I don't think it completely shuts the door on something like another veteran quarterback coming in here to compete with a rookie and Cam and really throw the kitchen sink at this problem.
Yeah, the worst thing you can be in the NFL is 7-9 without a plan at quarterback.
Well, guess what? That's exactly where they are right now.
Right.
Well, they might have a plan. I won't want to correct that. They might have a plan.
As we sit here today, and again, it's like I said at the beginning of the show, and this will probably become the new catchphrase. The next month and a half is just a fight against overreacting. Right. And but right now, Cam on a 1-year deal, it doesn't matter what you think of Cam Newton. He's on a 1-year deal, and one of two things one of two things happens. Either he struggles again and you don't have a long-term plan, or he plays really well and he's going to go out and get paid, and some other team is probably going to pay him more than the Patriots, and then you still don't have a long-term plan. So regardless of Cam Newton's performance, I don't believe right now the Patriots have a long-term plan at quarterback. The worst thing they could do is not pick somebody, ride it out with Cam Newton, go 7-9. Well, I guess being 12-4 without a plan at quarterback would be worse, but at least he went 12-4. He had that fun year. You just don't, you want some sort of long-term insurance. I don't count Jimmy Garoppolo as that. Jimmy Garoppolo is nearing 30 years old, has a serious injury history. The contract's a mess. So I agree with you. I wouldn't consider him, him and Cam, that's a wash. I think would be a really interesting position battle in camp between, Bill Belichick's two guys. You could make an argument those are his two favorite quarterbacks in football. But that doesn't solve the long-term needs. Gardner Minshew, I've said this before, I'm a big Gardner Minshew fan. I love watching him play. I don't know that, and he's young, he's 24. I don't know he has the upside where you're going to look at him and say, let's build around this guy for the next 4 or 5 years. Let's try to put pieces around him and see what he can do. I don't know that he has that upside. So, again, Cam as the bridge is fine, because in the bridge situation, there's a draft pick in here with a considerably high upside that you can get excited about. There's a huge difference between going 7-9 with no quarterback and going, this is a perfect example. There's a huge difference between going 7-9 with Jarrett Stidham as your young quarterback and going 7-9 with a top 10 pick as your young quarterback. Right. That's a huge difference. And it's basically, are the Patriots going to do what they need to do to get from option A to option B? And we don't know. We don't know. You said it. The contract being a backup, a priority backup contract makes it seem encouraging that there's another move coming. But is that other move Jimmy Garoppolo or is it Trey Lance? That's the $1 million question now. And again, we won't know for a month and a half. We can speculate all we want.
Right.
It's going to be frustrating. It is. Just
try
to bite your tongue. Nobody say anything stupid.
The one thing that was certain from the get-go was that the Patriots were not interested in these free agent quarterbacks, right?
Which is fine. They're pretty much all.
Ryan Fitzpatrick, Mitchell Trubisky, Jameis Winston, bringing back Jacoby Brissett. I think the Patriots felt that all of those options were worse than Cam Newton. And especially, they probably would have made more money, honestly, than Cam Newton. Similarly, I don't think the Patriots were ever really that into Marcus Mariota, who's my guy, but I don't think he was really their guy from the beginning either. So they were really only interested, I think, in two guys on this market, and that is Jimmy and Cam. And Jimmy was, I think, plan A, or at least a very high-end plan 1A, right? And then Cam was 1B or plan B, or however you want to slice that. And because the 49ers weren't willing to part with Jimmy before the draft, here we are. Now, the other question I wanted to kind of bring up here was just looking through at the draft, because we've talked about this a lot, Alex, and you actually sold me on this whole thing of who cares about who the bridge quarterback is, right? Who cares? As long as they get a viable NFL quarterback in the draft, it really doesn't matter if it's Cam or Fitzpatrick or whoever, right?
Will you watch 8 more weeks of Cam if it means 10 years of an all-pro quarterback? That's basically what it comes down to. I don't think anybody would say no, right? Yeah. 8 more bad weeks for a 10-year run. Yeah, you can sign me up for that. I'm very down with that.
Right. So I think from a football standpoint or X's and O's standpoint, the next logical question is, are you going down this road of a dual threat quarterback, right? Are you going down the road of the Cam Newton option offense? We're going to run zone read. We're going to run RPOs. We're going to run, QB power and stuff like that. Or are you willing to have a backup or have a young quarterback, I should say, who is like Mac Jones, who's a pocket passer, who's a guy that's going to sit on his spot and throw the ball with accuracy and timing through to all 3 levels of the field? Tom Brady light, right? We're not going to compare Mac to Tom Brady, but he's Tom Brady light. Is that right? Is that the path that you want to go down, or is the path more realistic? Trey Lance, Justin Fields, maybe a Kellen Mond, if they're really sold on him. I know you're not. I know here comes viral. Let's get to Kellen Mond in a second. Let's leave him off the table because I think that he's that like tweener quarterback. He's not quite Jamie Newman, Kyle Trask territory, but he's not in that top 5 either. So let's talk about Trey Lance, Justin Fields versus a Mac Jones. Is it really important, and should we be deciding who the next quarterback, is for the Patriots, the next young quarterback at least, by Cam Newton being here? Because I think that's something that's a slippery slope, right? Because Cam's here for 1 year. You don't really want to change your whole philosophy as an organization over 1 year of Cam Newton.
You're right. By the way, A-Rod and J-Lo just broke up. A little breaking news for you there. Yeah. So yes and no. I don't think you let it make the whole decision. I would say a year is a long time, especially for a rookie quarterback. Look at, and you're going to roll your eyes at this, all of the credit Brady has given to Bledsoe for his development. And they were together for 2 years, but not a long period of time, but that first year to 3 years is going to be a lot. And if Cam's only here for a year and you value him as a teacher, and I think that's fair. I think one of the things you can definitely credit Cam Newton about is he wants everybody around him to be better. He was Jarrett Stidham's biggest cheerleader last year, and that's not easy. Not every quarterback's going to do that. Look what happened with Carson Wentz. Yeah. So, if you're banking on Cam to be a teacher and you think that having him will help speed up the development, I think that's a factor that, we can develop Trey Lance better because we have Cam Newton in the building. You're not necessarily saying we have Cam Newton, so we have to have a quarterback like Cam Newton, but it factors in that his development might be expedited a little bit with Cam Newton in the building. I mean, I don't think that's a stretch. You can tell me if that's a stretch. The other thing is, if you do plan on making, or answer that first, is that a stretch, yes or no?
I don't think it's a stretch. I think the interesting thing about this is, and we talked about this the other day, that when they traded for Trent Brown, they got this offensive line that's like 1,400 pounds of girth, right? They have a bunch of big guys on Wenu, Trent Brown, Shaq Mason's a bigger guy. Marcus Cannon is even a bigger guy when he's out there. There's a lot of beef along that offensive line. And to me, when you look at that, the team that it does remind me a whole lot of is North Dakota State, right? That team was a run-first offense, and a lot of people hold that against Trey Lance, but in reality, they were a run-first offense. He threw the ball 20, 25 times a game really efficiently in those those attempts, and he ran the ball and he handed the ball off, and they were a multiple run scheme. They could run everything from wide zone to power lead, right? They had everything in their repertoire. And they were the Alabama of the FCS in 2019.
They've been for years.
They steamrolled everybody. So that's the offense that it kind of reminds me of, is what Trey Lance played with at North Dakota State. But the other side of that is okay, if you're thinking that you're going to draft a Mac Jones and he's not going to be able to move around, and that he can't play under pressure as much as a quarterback like Trey Lance, then maybe it does make sense to get 5 really good pass protectors in front of him that are going to keep him clean. So it goes both ways, but I think that ultimately I want to see the Patriots modernize their offense completely.
So that's the other thing I was going to say. And by the way, in the chat, I just praised Cam as a leader, and I got told I was whining. So that's interesting. But this is the part, because people want people to hate Cam so bad they make it up. I praise him as a leader. I'm whining anyway. So the other thing about it, when you talk about do you let Cam Newton dictate who you're looking at in the draft, is if the plan is to make the switch during the year, right, and do like what the Miami Dolphins did last year, Cam until the bye, and then you switch to the rookie, how much of a transition do you want that to be? Again, you're putting a lot of stock into 1 year of what you hope is a 10 to 12 to 15 year venture with this rookie, but the rookie year means a little more. That's the base. That's the foundation. And if it's Mac Jones, you have to change a lot about the offense. And basically, as you go through camp, as you go through the beginning of the season, until you make that switch, you're basically, everybody on the team, everybody in the offense is learning 2 systems, Cam's system and Mac Jones' system. There's not going to be a ton of carryover there. If you draft Trey Lance, and this could work for Fields, I'm just using Lance as the benchmark. If you draft Trey Lance, it's a much smoother transition, both for Lance and everybody else in the offense. And, the receivers have to come along too. If you switch quarterbacks, maybe Mac Jones is ready to go, but it takes everybody else a week or 2 to adjust, and then Mac Jones will slow out of the gate. Whereas with Trey Lance, I think it's just an easier transition on everybody. So again,
really, because really what you're getting at is everybody's out at practices, practicing zone read 1 week, and then the next week we're a drop back passing offense.
Yes.
Right. And that is a very confusing thing, I think, for a lot of players, and especially if they're going to have young receivers that are going to be catching passes from these quarterbacks, that's a whole lot of adjusting for them to kind of get used to those 2 different styles. But I want to go back to the modernizing the offense point, because I think what we're seeing across the league, and it's not the only way that you can do it, but the main way that you're seeing the trickle up effect of the college football game is that every single young quarterback that comes through is an athletic quarterback, right? You just don't get the stationary guys anymore. Especially, last year you had Joe Burrow, you had Justin Herbert, you had Tua. These are guys that can move. These are not stationary quarterbacks in the pocket. And this year it's similar. They have Trevor Lawrence. I think one of the most underrated parts of his game is his legs and his running ability. He's a really, really good runner. Zach Wilson isn't necessarily a high level design quarterback runner, but he can move around and he can be elusive. He's got more like Aaron Rodgers qualities to him when he scrambles, right? He's sneaky and he's slippery, but he's not necessarily going to carry the ball 60 times in a season. But I think a lot of these guys, Lance, Fields, Lawrence, Mond, Newman, even on some of the friend, the second tier guys, are mobile quarterbacks, and all these guys coming up through the college ranks, all these players that you're going to sign that are 26, 27 years old, they've been playing with those types of quarterbacks since 7-on-7 camp in middle school, right? They have been, and that's the new era. That's the new era. So I think it's definitely a lot different of a game now than maybe it was, when Brady and Breeze and Manning and those types of guys were coming along. These guys don't play with those types of guys anymore. That's not what you usually get. It doesn't mean it can't work. I mean, Mac Jones certainly worked at Alabama last year, but it's just a different style of game nowadays. And you see across the league, all of these quarterbacks, them taking advantage of their legs. And it's not just like Cam design quarterback run stuff. It's just the ability to extend plays, to create outside the pocket, to make something happen when there's nothing there initially through the progression. Those are things that I think are becoming more and more important at that quarterback position. And guys like Lance and guys like Fields and guys like Wilson have it in droves. They have that skill and they're really cerebral about it. I think that we could talk about a lot of these quarterback prospects. I want to talk about Justin Fields for a second, though, because I see a lot of people in the chat saying, why aren't we talking more about Justin Fields as an option? I think it's an interesting one to talk about because there are a lot of scouts in the league that have, I would say, more concerns in a lot of ways about Justin Fields' tape than Trey Lance's tape. Because Justin Fields' tape, there is a lot of evidence on there of him holding the football in the pocket. And that's one thing that NFL teams do not like to see, is a guy staring down his first read, holding the football in the pocket, not quick to process and not quick to get through, 1, 2, 3. But I think there is some element to the Ohio State offense that I can talk about in a second as why that happened. But what is your opinion on Justin Fields? Because we talked a lot about Lance and Mac Jones and those guys.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I've been so locked in on Lance is I just think he's the guy. I don't think they're getting into the top 4. And I think Wilson and Fields are going in the top 4. So yeah, Lance is more realistic. I'm also just worried. I know you have the excuses for why the Ohio State offense makes it harder for quarterbacks or whatever, but I think at a certain point, you worry about a program's ability to produce NFL-ready quarterbacks. And we saw it with Florida State about 10 years ago when it was, Jameis and Christian Ponder and you go back, you follow the coaching tree back to LSU and Jamarcus Russell, and that coaching staff just really struggled getting guys NFL ready. And now we're seeing it with Ohio State, guys like Dwayne Haskins, guys like Cardale Jones. There's just something there. And I think Ohio State, as good as the Big Ten is, and it's probably the 3rd best conference in college football, the Big Ten, there has been kind of a lack of talent, a lack of top tier talent that you'd expect from a conference like that over the last 5 or 6 years, with the exception of Ohio State. Ohio State recruits at an SEC level. Ohio State basically gets all of the best recruits north of, I don't know, Virginia, like north of the Appalachians, I think. I don't know, like that aren't the South. If you're not from the South, and you're an elite recruit, you're going to Ohio State or Notre Dame, and that's that. So these quarterbacks come in and just the talent around them is so above and beyond. Like, people want to knock Mac Jones for playing with talent at Alabama, and that's fine. It's not fine, but he played with a ton of talent. I get the argument, but he's also playing against the best defenses in the country. Those SEC defenses are loaded, whereas Justin Fields is in kind of the same scenario where he's playing with all 5-star wide receivers, but the defenses on the other side are not the same caliber that Mac Jones is facing at Alabama. Michigan went winless this year, okay? We're going to celebrate him beating up on Northwestern and Illinois and Nebraska, and these, I just can't do it. So I see the pattern, and look, it's true until it isn't. Eventually, maybe one Ohio State quarterback breaks through, right? Most of the quarterbacks in the league, I think the school with the most quarterbacks in the league last year was North Carolina State, who you don't think of as a powerhouse at all. So, it's true until it isn't. And maybe Fields is the one who breaks the mold, and that's certainly a chance. But I just look at Ohio State's history producing quarterbacks. I look at the talent discrepancy when you look at who they recruit versus who they play. And I think that's worthy of some red flags. Absolutely. And I said the same thing about Cardale Jones and the same thing about all the other Ohio State QBs. And I'd say the same thing about Tate Martell if he stayed there. Now he's a bum and he's gone, but I'll say the same thing about all the Ohio State QBs until one of them proves me wrong.
So just the great things about Justin Fields are the arm is electric, right? He can throw a football as far as he wants, as hard as he wants from any platform. And that's an important thing. And when I talk about any platform, I just mean his feet do not need to be set for him to be able to throw it 40 yards down the field on a rope. And that's a rare thing to have. And obviously he's an athletic guy. He's a big guy, sturdy guy in the pocket. But the concern that you have with the Ohio State offense is that everything in their offense converts down the field based off the coverage. So a lot of their routes are option routes. And we hear that with the Patriots a lot, but with Ohio State, it's a little bit different because they are a vertical passing offense that has option routes based on the coverage down the field. So one of their favorite routes to run is the middle read concept. And the middle read concept's simple. If you're playing too high coverage, you split the safeties. You're playing a post high safety coverage, you go across the field and you cross the safety's face. That's a route that you need to wait to see to develop, right? And I think the concern that people had with Justin Fields was that he would see, okay, this is a post safety or it's a split safety coverage. I'm going to sit on the middle read route. And he never got to number 2. He never got to number 3 in some cases. That didn't always happen, but that was sort of the plays you can pick out. That would be the concern, right? But I think when you look at that type of player, that's what we're talking about as the upside that we definitely want on this.
Let me just say, there's absolutely upside, right? For everything I just said about the Big Ten being weaker, he played well against Clemson, and that I think is why, right? Because remember, he kind of faltered there, and some people weren't sure. Maybe Zach Wilson should be the second quarterback. Maybe Trey Lance should be the second quarterback. That Clemson game is why he's still in the conversation at the top 4. I'm just saying, when you look at the whole body of work, that Clemson game is kind of the shining example.
There's 2 throws in that Clemson game that kind of sum up why everybody's in love with Justin Fields.
Right.
The first one was that slant touchdown where he threw it between 2 defenders down by the goal line and just zinged it in there for the touchdown. The second one was the bomb where he had to move off his spot, kind of throw off his back foot, and he still put it up 55 yards in the air for the receiver to run under it. You make those 2 types of throws, then you don't have to watch anything else about a quarterback prospect, right? You're just like, all right, this guy's got it. We'll see about all the little things. We'll work out all the little details. So we've talked about Fields. We talked about Lance. Zach Wilson, I think, is an interesting player to talk about, too. I have concerns about Zach Wilson's fit in the Patriots offense that I think people might not realize on the surface. He is not a player that necessarily likes to throw to the middle of the field, right? He's a guy that likes to throw outside the numbers and attack man coverage, or he likes to throw deep. He'll throw a deep post, but the intermediate routes, the short stuff over the middle, the anticipatory throws between coverage, that's not necessarily his game. And so that does concern me just a tad about him. But he's another one that, I mean, you draft him if you can draft him, right? He's certainly somebody that I wouldn't complain one bit if they decided that he was the guy. Yeah,
my biggest issue with him, and again, this isn't to say like they shouldn't take him if he's on the board. I would say that, at 6'3", 209 is what he's listed.
Yeah.
That's small. And he's, they do have that great offensive line, but we saw it with Tua. We kind of started seeing it at the end of the year with Kyler Murray, these smaller quarterbacks. And again, he's significantly taller than those guys, but he's not built like them.
They have a difficult time throwing in the middle of the field. Yeah.
Well, it's not just that. They have a difficult time absorbing the hits you take over the course of an NFL season, and they kind of get knocked around a little bit. And what's he going to look like in year 3 and year 4 when he's and again, Patriots have a good offensive line. So, they're the team where this is kind of the least of an issue, but how does he look in year 3 or 4 when he's got knocked around a couple times and that shoulder maybe starts developing something or maybe it's the hips like Tua or this and that. So I'm always like, that's part of the reason I like Lance and I like Jones. People call Mac Jones fat. I don't think he's fat. Trey Lance certainly isn't, but they're built. Right? Like Brady, people don't realize how big Brady was in terms of just mass.
Yeah.
Like he was
that was dense. The most surprising thing with Brady, that when I first got to see him in person, that was the most surprising thing about him is how thick he really is. He's a big guy.
I think that's an underrated value in a quarterback, especially now when, like you talked about, quarterbacks are moving around more and they're taking more hits. Cam's another one where it's like he's going to do as much damage to the defender as the defender does to him. That's worth something. I look at Zach Wilson, and he's got to put weight on. He's got to put a ton of weight on, I think, to have a long NFL career. He could be a guy that maybe comes on hot out of the gate and then struggles if he doesn't put that weight on. But that's my biggest issue with him is I know the scheme fits a thing. I think that's coachable. It's, can he develop an NFL body where he can take the hits and come back and still have a long career?
Well, the solution to what you're saying is moving him around the pocket, right? Bootlegs, mini bootleg actions, things to get him on the move where he's really, really good. Because when he gets outside the pocket and he gets on the move on their bootleg actions in the BYU offense, he throws some dimes down the field, like just absolute dimes, especially against man coverage, or if the safety, shies over to the crosser and he throws the deep post or something like that. There's a lot of really great throws down the field on Zach Wilson's tape when he is moving on the move, outside the designed on the move, not scramble drill stuff, but designed quarterback rollouts. And that's why a lot of people talk about him being such a great fit in that McVay Shanahan style of offense that loves to do that with the QB. If you're going to draft Zach Wilson and you want him to just stand there and scan the field, like you said, he's 6'3", 200 pounds. I don't think that's the type of quarterback that you're looking for. You're not going to survive with that guy there, I don't think. But if you can move him outside the pocket, if you can get him on the run, that's where he can be effective. Let's mention some of these day 2 guys before we wrap this up.
Yeah.
Kellen Mond, Kyle Trask. I know neither one of them excite you all that much, but I guess first, which one excites you the most, or which one would you be okay with them drafting either one, or do you think neither is a plan for them moving forward?
No, because again, they both have a little upside. Like there's something there that excites me, but I just don't think they need to go for it. They need to. Yeah. They kind of took the let's see what's their approach last offseason, and we saw where it got them. And I've compared Mond and Trask to Stidham before. Maybe there's some more upside there, but again, I think you're just, you're letting the quarterback isn't going to come to you. You got to go get the quarterback. And I think taking Trask or Mond is letting the quarterback come to you, and this guy's here where we're picking. It's nice, it's safe, it's comfortable, and maybe he works out, maybe he doesn't. We'll see. And you did that last year and it didn't work. And most of the time for any team at quarterback, that doesn't work. If you want the guy, you got to go get the guy. You do that either by winning 2 games in a 16-game season, or you do that by trading up. Bill Belichick's still here. He's worth 6 wins walking in the door. So you gotta go get the guy. And I just don't like, and I know it sounds like I'm basing this all on draft stock. There's some issues with Kyle Trask. He got panicky on third downs at Florida quite a bit. I think there's more of an argument, for the talent around him.
What worries me the most is that I think we're going to find out really soon that Kyle Pitts and Kadarius Toney are pretty darn good football players.
Yeah.
Kyle Pitts might be a generational talent. He could be, he has true Hall of Fame upside.
Kyle Pitts, and look, I think Devonta Smith's a really special player. I think there's an argument that Kyle Pitts is better than anybody that Mac Jones was throwing to.
Yeah.
I think you can make an argument for that.
I think it's a strong argument. I think Kyle Pitts is probably, to me, Kyle Pitts is offensive weapon number 1, right? He's the best offensive receiver, pass catcher, whatever you want to call it. He's the best one in the draft right now. So you have Kyle Pitts, you have Kadarius Toney. Kyle Pitts is an accuracy eraser. You throw it up to him in any sort of catchable place, and he's going to catch it. Kadarius Toney adds a whole lot after the catch. So it makes the quarterback stats look a whole lot better because he's gaining, 5 yards after the catch on every single time he touches the football. So those 2 things I think are important to mention with Trask. And I do also think, I know there were some injuries with him last year that maybe took away some of the zip on his fastball.
Yeah, the speeds, and I mean, they said this about Brady, the speed's not entirely there with him in terms of like how he operates. And if it's like 10 years ago, I think there's a chance Kyle Trask is the first pick in this draft. Because he's big, he's got the monster arm, he's got the brain for it, but he just can't. I don't know that he can do things quickly enough, and I don't know that he's quick enough for the modern game. Like I think he probably has more upside than Mond. He's more of a project. There's a higher risk there, and I think you minimize risk, and there's less risk with those top 4 guys. There's still risk. Like, I think there's tremendous risk. I already said in Justin Fields. I think Trey Lance, with the level of competition, there's risk, but it's a different, more manageable risk than like that's all coachable stuff. The risk is on you. It's either the guy's going to succeed or fail based on what you do with him. I think when it comes to a guy
That's
like Trey Lance,
for a lot of these quarterbacks, we go and
but is that true for Trask? I think with Trask, you're counting on some natural development from him that's out of your control, and with Mond even more so.
Yeah, so I think the problem with Trask is that I see is when he and I know that some people in the chat mentioned the injury. I know the injury existed, but when he needed to go back and get a little bit more, when he needed to really drive the ball down the field, the zip just wasn't there. The ball just doesn't come out of his hand well enough. And I think that is definitely something that's a little bit concerning, because in the NFL, these windows close fast, right? And they close quickly. And Trask is the type of guy that kind of reminds me a little bit of Jimmy G, in the sense that doesn't really have the arm to push the ball plus 10 yards down the field with zip and with accuracy both together. If he puts all of his weight into it, yeah, he can probably get the ball there enough. But is it going to be where it needs to be, right? And when he needs to throw accurately, he tends to take the ball a little bit off. It's like a changeup, right? And that's something that I think is a little bit concerning. With Kellen Mond, I'm a lot higher on Kellen Mond than you are. I know that. What I see with Kellen Mond is somebody that gets how to play the quarterback position. He understands the conceptual idea of what the offense is trying to do, where the offense is trying to attack the defense, how he's trying to get through a progression. He's a guy that understands, okay, they're in quarters coverage over the smash concept. I need to get off of that and get to the backside read, because no one's going to be open over here, right? He's that type of guy that understands when he hits his back foot and sees the coverage on that side of the field. If their coverage is beating the combination that he has over there, he cancels it out quickly and he moves on. I like that. I like that he can move around a little bit. I think he moves better than Kyle Trask does. That's something that I think is a little bit more intriguing about Kellen Mond. But ultimately, after today, after this news about Cam, and I know this is going to blow you away, Alex, I'm out on all these other quarterbacks. All right. If you're not going to bring me a top 5 QB in this draft, if you're not going to draft somebody in the first round, then I think you're failing. I think it's a failure, because you're really not moving the needle enough for me.
Welcome to Planet Reality.
There you go. So that's ultimately how I feel now, is that.
Well, let me say this. And since you gave me that, because I've been trying to convince you of that for weeks. Yeah. Let me give you this. I don't hate the idea of a Robert Griffin, Kirk Cousins thing. And maybe it's Lance and Mond, right? I don't think you take them in the round 1 and round 2, but Mond's basement is round 4. Maybe he has a bad pro day. You get him at the beginning of day 3, something like that. Maybe Jamie Newman. Can
I give you another name?
As long as it's not Ian Book.
It's not Ian Book.
Okay, thank God. All right. Or Sam Ellinger.
It definitely, nope.
Okay.
It definitely depends.
Felipe Franks?
Nope.
Okay, I'm good.
It definitely depends on the direction that they're going in. And this kind of makes more sense if Mac Jones is the pick in the first round. But Davis Mills from Stanford has some things. All right. He's not, I'm not sitting here saying
he's Cousins-ish. Yeah.
He has some things about him. He's got a good arm, enough arm, NFL arm. He gets through the reads quickly. He's an accurate passer within 20 yards of the line of scrimmage. He's definitely a guy, and we say this every draft season, he is definitely a guy that the league is a lot higher on than draft media is, right? He is not a sleeper in NFL circles. He might be considered a sleeper in our circles, but in NFL circles, teams are considering him as a viable draftable option, especially in the 3rd or the 4th round. So I love the RG3 Kirk Cousins idea. I think that's exactly the way
you want a better result, but just to be clear, you want a better result. The concept I just mean is taking one quarterback on day 1, one on day 3.
Yeah, but even if you don't get a better result and you end up with Kirk Cousins, I think you could do a whole lot worse. I think Belichick can win with Kirk Cousins. Is he going to win a Super Bowl with Kirk Cousins? I guess it depends on what he gets around him and what he gets on defense. But if they have a great defense and they have some receivers that Kirk Cousins can throw the ball to, I think Bill Belichick could probably make a Super Bowl with Kirk Cousins as the quarterback. So
I can't wait to pull that out of context. Evan Lazar wants the Patriots to trade for Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, right. So David Mills is the guy. I think if Mac Jones is the guy, if they want to go that pocket passer, timing, rhythm-based, then I think those two do pair well together.
So I know we talked about matching the bridge guy to the first round pick.
Yeah.
I actually think if you do that, like Washington did, I actually think you go in two different directions.
So
I
maybe,
think
right, so maybe that's it. Maybe
I
they
think it's Lance
right.
in Mills is because
Yeah.
you diversify your portfolio,
Yeah.
for lack of a better term, right? If it's Mac Jones, then maybe you go with a guy like God, probably like Ian Book as much as he's going to be.
No.
But you don't go with Ian Book under any means. You don't draft Ian Book. Ian Book is just Trace McSorley with a ton more charisma. That's all he is. Pass. But yeah, you're welcome to sanity. It's got to be a first round guy. You don't middle in it. And if they don't take a first round quarterback, you'll go with the Kansas City approach or what some of these other teams have done, where draft everybody else, use your top 100 picks, get a receiver, get a tight end, get the defensive lineman you need, get all the other players you need. And then next year, you trade all your picks into the top 3 and you draft Phil Dracovic, or you draft Sam Howell, or you draft Spencer Rattler. Like that's, if they don't take a quarterback in the first round, just don't do it. You deal with one more year of Cam, and then you go all in for the quarterback next year because you've got the rest of your roster completely set.
That's not a bad approach, but is Bill Belichick?
It's going to be frustrating.
Is Bill Belichick going to trade the capital to move that high up? And I think that's a conversation to have right now.
Well,
about this draft too. Because they might not be able to sit there at 15 and take one of these quarterbacks. Probably not.
Right. So you can, if you know that's your approach, you can start planning for it. Again, is Bill Belichick going to give up that much? If he's comfortable with the other 52 players on his roster, he might. You accomplish that this year. The other thing is, if you try like hell to trade up and you can't, and you're stuck at 15 and they're all off the board, Mac Jones is off the board, you can trade 15, probably get back in next year first. And then all of a sudden you have 2 first-round picks next year to help you move up. So it's going to be really scary to do. If you're not positive it's coming, it's going to look very odd. I think it would upset a lot of people, but that's a better strategy than just middling around and taking Kyle Trask on day 2. It is. It's going to be a lot more frustrating, a lot harder to watch, but that's a quicker path back to perennial division contender, perennial playoff team.
I think that if that's the route they want to go, then I guess I can get on board with it. I would still like to see them draft a quarterback this year anyways, though. And maybe it's not in the first round because they're
whatever you want to do round 5 and on, that's your own.
I'm talking about drafting somebody that has some starter upside, right? And maybe it's just a version of Jared Stidham, just a different name, right? Different model. And that's okay too, but I still would like to see them take a bite at that apple, regardless of when it is, just to make sure that they got one guy that can come in and compete.
Well, if you want to take a bite, and I've said this half sarcastically in the past, but I'm not the one bringing it up here. The chat brought it up. Colt McDonald is a free agent. Like at that, why are you using a second round pick on Kellen Mond when you can just go get a Cole McDonald off the street? Thank you, chat, for bringing him up.
So,
and I don't like big names. I like the good quarterbacks. The good quarterbacks are the big names because it's quarterback. And when you play quarterback and you're good,
all right, don't
big
fight
name.
with the people in the chat. All right. The other thing in the chat though is the question of, and this is how we can sort of wrap this up. Does this Cam Newton news eliminate the Patriots from the Gardner Minshews, from the Marcus Mariotas, from the Jimmy Garoppolos of the world? Could they still bring in another veteran quarterback, or are we committed to Cam at this point being the veteran option on the roster?
I feel like if they really wanted one of those guys, they would have gotten them. They clearly didn't want those guys for the price. Does the price go down between now and the start of training camp? If anything, I think it only goes up, right? Garoppolo's the wild card there because San Francisco could end up with a better quarterback, but you think Jacksonville wants to keep Minshew to back up Trevor Lawrence, right?
That's the hardest thing with me and Gardner Minshew. A lot of people talk about Gardner as a legitimate option for the Patriots. He's all right, but I think the biggest problem is why is Jacksonville in any hurry to trade him? Right here, they have a guy, a 24-year-old quarterback that does have some upside at $900,000 against the salary cap. That's the we just talked about the RG3 Kirk Cousins thing, right? Trevor Lawrence with Gardner Minshew on the roster just as an insurance policy. That's what you want if you're Jacksonville, right? You don't want to, you're putting all your eggs in the Trevor Lawrence basket, don't get me wrong, but you want to have one little egg that you keep over here, right? And that's Gardner Minshew. So for the cost, for his age, for his production in the past, unless they're going to blow them away with the trade offer, I just don't see why Jacksonville is parting with Gardner Minshew just like that. It's not like you're going to trade a 4th round pick at this point for Gardner Minshew. I just don't see what's the incentive there for Jacksonville.
Right. The price keeps going up. Again, Jimmy's the one exception because it's that weird thing where maybe San Francisco moves up and gets a guy. But I said this earlier in the show, right? They didn't get Garoppolo because San Francisco wouldn't conform to their timeline. I'd like to see Bill stick it to John Lynch and make sure that they're picking higher than the Niners, wherever the picks end up in the draft, however they make the trades. And if you go up that high and you grab Trey Lance, you don't need Jimmy Garoppolo anymore. Like at that point, you're just getting irresponsible. Cam's your bridge. You don't need 2 of those guys. You're at that point, you're taking reps away from your potential franchise quarterback. So it's still possible. Again, this offseason is going to be really bizarre. And maybe they trade for Marcus Mariota a week after the draft. But I think if those guys,
Mariota and Jimmy G are out currently because of their contracts. If one of those guys shakes free and is willing to restructure their deal after the trade, or if Marcus Mariota is released by the Raiders to get salary cap compliant because they want to make another move that they don't have the money for, then maybe we can get into those conversations. But they are not going to pay $20 million plus for either one of those guys. And right now, if Marcus Mariota were to start all 16 games, that's how much money he's going to make with his incentives, and they are just not going to do that.
Can we do one? Because some people in the chat are talking about Jarrett Stidham and saying we're disrespecting
I was going to pull it up because I just wanted to put it on the screen.
If
we are not sleeping on Jarrett Stidham,
if the Patriots believed, and they've seen him a ton more than we have, and we're going on year 3, and they've seen him in practice every week. If they believe Jarrett Stidham could be the number 1 quarterback, Cam wouldn't be here right now. They wouldn't have signed his contract today. They would have waited. I know that Cam's the recruiter and this and that. Money's the ultimate recruiter, and they have plenty of that. Cam helps, certainly, but they can offer Kenny Golladay $5 million more a year than the next closest team. They can offer Hunter Henry $5, $6, $7 more million a year than the next closest team and still fill out the rest of their roster. They're going to be okay. If they believed in Stidham, they wouldn't have brought Cam back. So I'm not the one. We're not the ones sleeping on Jarrett Stidham. We're not bashing, like baselessly bashing Jarrett Stidham. We are just looking at the evidence presented to us, and that is the Patriots do not believe Jarrett Stidham is a starting NFL quarterback. Frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets traded. I think it's more likely they trade a quarterback than they trade for a quarterback here between now and the draft.
So the question is does Jarrett Stidham have any trade value, first of all?
But he'll have a little bit. You're not going to get a ton, but you might be able to do like a 6 or 7 pick swap.
Yeah, you might get a day 3 pick. I think the biggest thing with Jarrett Stidham is that the Patriots did not see the drive. They didn't see that killer instinct. He was. We used the comparison from
Alex Moran, Blue Mountain State, early season. Alex Moran. He gets it.
Right. He eventually takes over. Right. Alex Moran, the guy that's just satisfied carrying the clipboard. Right. That's the guy that they saw out of Jarrett Stidham last year, and there was actually a sense that Jarrett Stidham, when Cam Newton was signed, was relieved, which is the opposite of what you want to hear. And he was relieved because he had all this pressure on his shoulders to be the guy after Brady, and he didn't want it, right? He didn't want that pressure. He didn't want that smoke. So I think the biggest thing with Jarrett Stidham is that there is some ability there. And we saw the ability in the preseason last year. But if you want to be good, really good or great, then you need to be able to work at it every single day, every single practice, every single second that you live, breathe, and die for football. And I just don't think that they saw that urgency from him, and therefore he was inconsistent. And that's exactly what we saw in his rookie preseason. As great as some of those throws were, a lot of the throws were not great. And there was just a lot of peaks and valleys, which is to be expected for a young quarterback. But he never really took that next step where one throw out in training camp, we watch him throw one sideline out, and it's like, boom, wow. This guy's got a great arm. That's great ball placement. He did it, right? And then the next throw, the ball's at the guy's feet, or it's an interception, or it's a pop fly punt. And it just wasn't consistent enough, well-rounded enough. Alex, there's a lot of people in the stream right now. We really appreciate everybody that's watching. So if you have a question, drop it in the chat. We'll try to stay on for a little bit longer and answer some of your questions.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, well, we're waiting for them to come in. One quick thing on Stidham and the trade value, because you said, what can you get for him, right? This is so I feel like and this applies to Cam too, actually. This is two takes. I'll give the Stidham one first. You're still going to kind of have COVID's still going to be a thing next year. It's not going to be as big of a deal, but it's still going to be a factor, right? And we saw teams last year, they wanted that third quarterback around. And, maybe you go out and you go and you get a veteran third quarterback. Stidham's going to be significantly cheaper. So maybe you convince some team to take Stidham off your hand, 6th, 7th pick swap, and you move up in the draft. And so there's inherent value in that. The other thing, just going back to Cam, I want to talk about as these questions roll in. I do see people saying, well, maybe Cam with a full off season will be better.
Yeah.
That's not guaranteed right now. Last we heard from the league, it's going to be all virtual again until training camp. And if they do overhaul the receiver position, which they probably will and they should, you're kind of right back where Cam's going to be throwing at guys in July for the first time. And maybe Curtis Samuel, he played with him in Carolina. That's a little different. But that narrative, I feel like today has gotten pumped up a little too much. Yes, he's better off in year 2 than year 1. But the concept of a full off season, we're not there yet.
Yeah, and I think that's such a great point of we should not – I don't want people to think that me and Alex are sitting here trying to sell you this crown that Cam Newton is all of a sudden going to turn the Patriots around next year. That's not
as cool as that would be.
Yeah, I don't think that's the mantra that the Patriots should be taking about it either, right? They should be thinking about this as a 1 year, exactly what they signed him to, a 1 year bridge contract, right? That's the way that we should be looking at this. The second that you start looking at it, oh, well, he had COVID and he had nobody to throw to, and maybe we can turn it around with Cam. That's when I feel like you start losing me, because you can't try to do that, right? You have to hope that happens, but count on it not happening. And I think that that's a really important distinction there. All right, let's see if we can get some of these questions. Okay, so I think this is an important question in terms of we haven't really talked about trade compensation to actually move up into the top 10 to draft.
Let me pull up the trade chart.
So the trades that I think that we can sort of base this off of is really the one trade most recently was the Buffalo Bills trading up to draft Josh Allen. They only gave up a 3rd round pick to move up for Josh Allen. Now, maybe the Patriots could move up in a situation similarly to Allen, who had a lot of concerns coming out. Trey Lance has similar FCS level type of concerns, right? So maybe teams aren't as convinced about him because of his level of competition. I think it's going to take more than that, though. I really do. I think it's going to take probably a future 1st round pick. So you're trading kind of 2 1st round picks, maybe a 3rd, because you're going to have to put together a package to jump over some of these teams.
Do you think the trade? So for people who don't know, there's a trade chart. Basically, Jimmy Johnson once said in an interview that all the teams use this chart. It applies point values to picks, and that's how they decide what trades are fair and what aren't. Supposedly, Bill Belichick uses a slightly different chart. Rich Hill from Pat's Pulpit has put that out there. You can check, if you Google NFL draft trade chart, you can see them all online. But basically, the idea is when you make a trade, the values are supposed to line up. So, for instance, I'll pull it up here on this is the Patriots chart, I believe. Yep. The first overall pick is worth 1,000 points. Next pick is worth 717, where the Patriots pick at 15th is 315 points. So it's worth a 1/3 of the first overall pick. So, for instance, last year, right, when they traded, it doesn't always line up. When they traded down for Kyle Duggar, they actually gave up 20 points. What they gave up in picks was worth 20 points more than what they got back. So it doesn't always work evenly. Frankly, it would be hard to make it always work evenly. Somebody's going to give a point or two here or there. 20 is a bit much. So there's background. My question to you is, if that's the trade, if they're moving up, let's say 6, I think 6 is where you need to go to get Lance or Fields, whichever one of those two goes second.
Sure.
If you're moving up to 6, is the trade chart applicable, or are you throwing that out and just accepting it's going to be a gross overpay based on the chart?
I think you have to throw it out because the Patriots are going to be far from the only let's say the Eagles say we're not taking a quarterback at 6. We're going to stick with Jalen Hurts.
And they've said as much. I think that's more or less out there.
Right. So let's say that's what happens with the Eagles and they put a for sale sign on number 6 and Trey Lance and Justin Fields are still actually, I think it's more likely that one of those quarterbacks will still be sitting there. And that's when it gets to be a real overpay, right? Yeah. If 2 of them are sitting there, then maybe you can kind of get it for a decent deal. If only one is left and you got San Francisco and you got New Orleans and Chicago in the 20s that are probably going to be willing to give up a whole lot, you're going to find yourself into a bidding war really fast. But I think the question is that I have is Dallas at 10, I think is a great target for the Patriots if one of these quarterbacks slips just a little bit, because Dallas might be interested in Stephon Gilmore. And then you can start throwing Gilmore into the trade. And maybe instead of a first, and a third, it's a first and Gilmore and a third, or a first and, you know what I mean? You can maybe get away with not giving up one of those future picks if you can get an actual player in the deal as well. I don't know if Philadelphia or Cincinnati would be as interested in a 30-year-old corner as a team like Dallas that has Dak back and knows that it's going to be trying to run it back to win the Super Bowl. So I think the Patriots, if you're a Patriot fan and you want them to move up for a quarterback, really cross your fingers that one of those guys slides to number 10 and is still on the board. Then I think maybe the Patriots could play with Stephon Gilmore a little bit as well.
See, I'm fine with them overpaying for the quarterback though if it takes to go to 6. Like if it's this year's first, this year's second, and next year's first, like does that get them 6? 15 next year's first and 40, whatever it is, 46.
It should. But the question is are we talking about an RG3 situation where everybody wants the guy and it's got to be some Godfather offer, right?
I'm asking, like, is that like is the team offering more than that?
I think it should get it done.
I see that. To me, that is a no-brainer to me. I would do that. It's going to cost you 2 first-round picks to get a good quarterback. I just think at some point you're going to have to surrender that first-round pick. And the reality is, maybe you trade Gilmore for a 2022 first, and then boom, you're back in the first round next year.
Right. That's an interesting point too, is that they could trade Gilmore for a future pick and get a little bit of a higher value on that future pick, because usually future picks are less value than picks in this draft, obviously. Let's talk about this question quickly. Everybody under the sun asks me about Odell all the time. So Cam and Odell are boys. We all know that. They did the roundtable discussion together last offseason. They really are really good friends. And I think the one thing that stands out is that Odell looks up to Cam, not the other way around, right? Cam is the guy to Odell. So if there's one player one star receiver that you can convince Cam is an attractive guy to be with, it's probably Odell. Maybe Curtis Samuel, if Curtis Samuel had a good time with Cam in Carolina, can be a pull. But I don't think Kenny Golladay is coming to New England because of Cam. He's coming here because of the cash, right? Because of the money. Odell's the one guy that maybe you could convince me in. But what does the trade look like? Maybe Gilmore's involved in that trade. But just Odell on his own, do you like the idea of bringing him in here?
I guess. I mean, I think at that point, we talked at the beginning of the show, right? Which way are they going with Cam? Is he the bridge, or do they think they can fix him and he's the unquestioned starter? I think if you bring in Odell, you're kind of leaning towards that unquestioned starter territory, because, how's Odell going to react when he's got to work with a rookie quarterback and 8 weeks in, he's not catching the ball, and maybe he likes it, right? Keenan Allen was the most targeted receiver in the league last year, catching balls from Justin Herbert. Right. Maybe you can sell Odell on, hey, you're going to be the offense. When we switch to, like, you and Cam are going to do what you're going to do, but when we switch to the rookie, you're the offense. You're 75, 80% of the offense, and he might enjoy that. So I don't know. I just think, like you mentioned, with that relationship, I wonder how much of a package Cam and Odell are, and I wonder if that makes it tougher to move on from Cam when you need to, whether it be in week 8 or at the end of the season. Somebody brought up, I'd like to do this. Yeah. Somebody said, what's the best case scenario drafting free agency? What should Patriots fans hope for? And I mean, we'll keep it realistic. They're not trading up for Lawrence.
Right.
But I assume that's what that meant.
I'm trying to find the question. It's all right. My computer's acting a little bit slow. What's the best case scenario to me?
Yeah.
I think the best case scenario to me is Corey Davis, Curtis Samuel, and Trey Lance. And I don't think that is like completely pie in the sky. Like it's a little bit, but I don't think that it's a completely impossible scenario to happen. We've talked a lot about on the show how great Corey Davis and Curtis Samuel will pair together. Those are two complementary pieces. Curtis Samuel is your ball carrier. He's your off the line guy, slot Z receiver. He's going to move around the formation. You're going to scheme him open. Corey Davis is your one-on-one X receiver on the outside that works the vertical route tree on the outside. Those two guys go together like yin and yang, right? And I think that that's an important quality, is you don't want to just sign a bunch of the same guy, right? You definitely want to make sure that you have a complementary option. So that would be my best case scenario, but maybe you like one of the tight ends or something like that thrown in there as well.
Yeah, I'd like to see them be aggressive with the tight end. I'd like to see them land Hunter Henry or Jonnu Smith. I really would. I don't want to worry about the tight end position. I want somebody that I know week one is a threat to catch 10 passes for 100 yards.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying either of those guys will necessarily do that on a consistent basis, but a guy the defense has to worry about and just I want 5 guys on the field that the defense has to worry about. When N'Keal Harry was out there last year, early in the season with Jacoby Myers, and obviously that flipped, but when they were putting like Dante Moncrief out there, they were just guys that the defense could throw their fourth corner on and forget about it. And the Patriots offense is built on unpredictability in the sense that some teams funnel their offense through one receiver, right? The picture is Calvin Johnson in Detroit, and that was the whole offense. And when he left, the offense actually got better, not because he was a bad player, but there was more variety. And the Patriots really need that variety to be successful, and they didn't have that last year. So get a tight end, get a pass-catching running back, get a big body physical wide receiver, get a fast wide receiver, Brashad Perryman, get the wild card guy, the Curtis Samuel kind of guy. Like, I hope that it's not you had the report where they have a bag of money waiting for whoever the receiver is. We don't know. Receiver, I don't want to say receiver X because that implies that the Y receiver or whatever, you terminology people get mad at me, but receiver question mark.
Right.
I don't hate that concept, but I just hope that's not it. I hope that they build an entire offense and don't just get one guy. And then at the quarterback position, Lance or Fields. I think I'd rather have Fields. I think I'd rather have Lance. I know I'd rather have Lance, but I'd take Fields. But somebody that we can get excited about. And what I don't want to be doing, and some of this is selfish because it's me and my job and it's our job to talk about this, but also just as a fan, because believe it or not, I am a fan. I know people think that everybody who covers the Patriots hates them and is out to get them. I love this team. I want to see the team win. It's more fun for me personally. It's more fun for me professionally. I don't want to be sitting here next year talking about who's the quarterback going to be. Are they bringing Cam back? Are they going to trade for Jimmy? Are they going to draft?
I don't want to sell people a bridge. I don't want to sell people something that's not real. And I think that last year, and myself included, we kind of got coaxed into the Cam thing a little bit, especially during
the Stidham thing. Some people got coaxed into Stidham too.
Okay, well, I wasn't one of those people.
You were not, but I'm just saying, let's no more false hope. If they draft Trey Lance and he doesn't play this year, which I think is possible, and I don't necessarily think is the wrong thing.
Still better than us trying to sit here and tell people that Cam Newton is going to be they're going to turn Cam's career around, or that Cam is actually going to pan out, right?
Well, I don't even mean it as an anti-Cam thing. It's just next year we can be talking about Trey Lance, and we can be excited about Trey Lance. And what did he learn as a rookie? What did he learn from Cam? What are they going to be able to do with the offense? Where the receivers for him? Half the time when we've talked about offensive weapons, right? We haven't been able to talk about who we want because we come back to, well, it depends who the quarterback is. Yeah. And we've done that for 2 years. It's getting old at this point. So I said it to you off the air, just kind of as a joke. It'd be nice to be able to get excited about something, to be hopeful about something. And I just what are we excited about right now? I guess it's the prospect of drafting Trey Lance or Zach Wilson or Fields or whoever, but it's not concrete. I just hope we get something concrete to be excited about.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Do we back up the Brinks truck for Kenny Golladay? Yes or no?
As long as just like what I said, if they're comfortable signing Kenny Golladay for $25 million and spending another 12 on Curtis Samuel and another 8 to trade and get Zach Ertz, then yeah, he's the best receiver. Absolutely go for it. If $25 million a year is their budget at the pass catcher position, Don't spend it all in one place.
Yeah.
So that's answering a question with a question. But
well, I think the problem is that normally the Patriots would be able to be in a situation where they could structure the contract the way they want to structure it. So even though, like this morning when Cam Newton's news broke that he had a $14 million contract, and then we sort of learned more contract information about it later on, and it's not actually a $14 million deal. With Kenny Golladay, if you're going to get him here, you got to give him a hefty signing bonus, right? And you have to give him guaranteed money up front. So you're not going to be able to be, fancy with the contract structure. You're not going to be able to load up all that money in per game roster bonuses like they like to do, because he's not going to take that deal, right?
Somebody's going to just give him the money.
Right. He just wants real money. So
like you can bank up a Brinks truck, but if there's no money in it and you're just giving him the truck, what good does that do?
Right. And I think the Patriots tend to do that with players, and that's not something that's normal across the league. That's not a normal practice of all these deals the Patriots tend to sign are somewhat incentive laden. They hardly ever actually give the player a bag of money when they sign the contract. It's very rare. Most of the time, a lot of their contracts are tied into per game roster bonuses. So you have to be healthy and you have to play all 16 games to get your cash. And I don't think a guy like Kenny Golladay, who's been hurt in the past, I don't think that he's going to go out there and sign that deal. So that's, I think, a really difficult element of that whole thing. Are we hopeful at all? Oh, sorry. What
no, it just went away. Where was it? It was a quick one. Oh God, I can't remember now, and I can't scroll down here. It was like, it was about the Trey Lance, talking about Trey Lance and pressure.
Okay.
Right. And I saw some people say this in the chat that a second round quarterback has less pressure on him than first round quarterback, and Lance is coming. It's not D2, it's D1 AA.
Yeah.
First off, the guy can't handle the pressure. He shouldn't be here. Second of all, it was a really minor thing during his pro day today, but it stood out to me. There are a couple of times, like in between throws, you just saw him crack a smile. And I mean, that was a ton of pressure for him. He only started 1 year in college. He lost his 2020 season. How he performed today was the difference in millions of dollars.
Oh, yeah.
And he's out there smiling, and he was just having a good time throwing the ball around. Like, I don't think this is a kid who's going to get phased. I actually don't. I didn't think it before, but I saw that today. A lot of guys go through these workouts robotically, it's just the process.
You're in on Trey Lance now. I love that. It took me a while to break you, but I finally broke you down.
You know what I want more than anything else? I want guys that have fun playing football, or at least enjoy it, right? Play the game happy, play the game angry. They just play the game with emotion.
Just got Cam back. He's definitely one of those guys.
That is, I will say that Cam, when he was on last year, right, and he's popping up after the first down runs and point, and he's yelling in guys' faces, like that's great. Like if Cam turns it around, it's going to be the best story ever. It's going to be a ton of fun. So Trey Lance, to me, from what I've seen, I don't think pressure gets to this kid. The pressure is only going to get higher, and everybody has their breaking point. But I don't think, I think he's got a good head on his shoulders. I think he can handle it.
I've never worried about that. He carried a perfect season into the FCS championship in 2000.
He won a title, yeah.
And won the title and won the MVP of the game. So
by the way,
that's a concern.
The whole D1A, AA, D2 thing, like there's pressure at every level. It's all relative.
North Dakota State was on a crazy game winning streak. They had a perfect season, and they had a winning streak going into that game. That I think
won the title the year before too.
Right. So it was a long winning streak that was on the line, and they were playing James Madison, who had a really good season and were a legitimate team. They only beat them, I think, by like a touchdown, and they were and Trey Lance played great. And then he went out today. Quincy Avery, his quarterback's coach, he was the guy that was running the pro day. The two of them, he overthrew a deep ball. And Quincy Avery just said, "Hey, whatever, man. Whatever. They're not going to not draft you in the first round because you overthrew one deep ball." And that's when he cracked that smile and was kind of just like, whatever, too. All right. What about guys like AJ Green, Marvin Jones, T.Y. Hilton? I've left all these guys off my list because they're all over the age of 30, and I don't think the Patriots should be interested in those types of players anymore. But maybe, you kind of talk into one reclamation project, right? Bill gets one sort of veteran that he can try to save. Is AJ Green that veteran?
Maybe. And look, I think there's some value in having a guy like that. I think you want a veteran voice in there. If you have young receivers and if you have a young quarterback, right? We've talked about Cam being a teacher. Yeah. Receiver can teach a young quarterback too. Look at what Larry Fitzgerald has done for Kyler Murray, right? And that kind of thing. So maybe it is AJ Green. Maybe it is T.Y. Hilton. So who are the three guys you just named again? Because I think they fit in three very different categories.
T.Y. Hilton, Marvin Jones. AJ Green.
So I think Marvin Jones is still like a first or second day of free agency guy. I think he's played well enough that he's going to get a big contract and all of that. And yeah, if you're talking about Marvin Jones at that point, go get Corey Davis, go get Juju. Like, I just think you go young at that point. T.Y. Hilton, I think, can still play, but he's like a second or third week of free agency guy. He's also not the kind of guy that he's traditionally gone after, but we've talked about they need a downfield speed element.
Right.
And, I've floated Rashad Perryman. We've talked about potentially Brandon Cooks being traded, but he restructured his contract. T.Y. Hilton in that role where he's not your number one receiver, but he, basically, if you have him in the role Damiere Byrd was in last year, that's a major upgrade. And I don't know, I don't think it's going to cost you a ton. So I don't hate the idea of T.Y. Hilton. And then AJ Green, I think, is maybe after the draft, further down the road. And it goes back to what I said before.
Green is in the Chad Johnson, Joey Galloway.
I wouldn't go that far. I'd put him in like the Kenny Britt category, maybe. Jordan Matthews. I think
like
he's in
Hilton in theory because he's a fast guy. The issue I have with T.Y. Hilton is that he has a whole lot of soft tissue injuries in recent years, hamstring pulls, groin pulls, stuff like that. And that's what happens with speed guys, is those guys, they want to come out of the blocks so fast and they pull a hammy and they want to, they pull out of the blocks and there goes the calf. Right. And this happens a lot with those types of guys. And towards the end of their careers, their bodies tend to break down in the soft tissue stuff. And that is a little bit concerning. Is he's great when he's out there. I'd have similar concerns, but to a lesser degree, really, with John Brown. Both of those guys can really fly and they can play that role, that Dorsett Bird role. But can they keep him on the field? And that's definitely something that I would have some hesitations with. Any love for Nelson Aguilar? Because I kind of have love for Nelson Aguilar.
Like, what's the clip? We was catching him like Aguilar. I don't know. I think he certainly played better last year, and some of those drop issues went away. He's still pretty inconsistent, which is tough because I think we're all sick of the inconsistent wide receivers. Like I said, they need to build an offense. If he's the third or fourth guy you bring in and you already have Corey Davis and you already have Curtis Samuel, you already have Juju, like whatever, and this is the third guy you bring in, essentially him and Myers are going to flip-flop for the third receiver role. Like, that's not bad. I'd say the same thing about the guys from before and the AJ Greens. I'm not, making him my big signing. I think some people are a little high on him after a big year last year. It was 1 year. I just don't see the consistency for him in the Patriots offense.
Yeah, he's definitely a complimentary receiver, right? He's not your first move, but what I do like about him is that he has that inside-outside versatility, right? He played a little bit more on the outside last year with the Raiders. In Philadelphia, he was basically a full-time slot guy. So he does have some of that, right? He has that kind of inside-outside ability. He can run. He can take the top off a little bit. He averaged 18 yards per catch last year for the Raiders. He had a sneaky, really good season last year for Vegas.
He did. And did he, am I imagining this, or did he play really well against the Patriots last year? I'll pull it up.
He drew a pass interference call against Stephon Gilmore. I remember that. And Gilmore reached out and grab him. And I think at the time, everybody was like, oh my God, Stephon Gilmore just got burned by Nelson Aguilar. Like, how does that happen, right? And then as the season wore on, it turned out that Nelson Aguilar was actually a real player, and especially a real guy as a vertical threat on the outside for the Raiders. So I love the versatility because the Patriots are going to covet that too. So he's not your number one guy, but if they're able to get Juju or they're able to get Corey Davis or Kenny Golladay or one of those guys to play on the outside, Juju's not necessarily an outside guy, but those other two, and Davis and Golladay, and you want to have Nelson Aguilar as your Z receiver, as your flanker moving off the line of scrimmage, I think you could do a whole lot worse there. And I think that he would present a decent upgrade.
Well, here's an interesting one who's the similar player is Marquise Lee.
Oh boy.
And he already knows somebody in the chat brought him up. He already knows the playbook. You think so you put no stock into Marquise Lee. You just think he's going to get cut before camp?
He might get cut before camp. Maybe they bring him to camp, but I don't know. He's a true slot guy, right? A true slot guy, not a burner, but he does win with body positioning, possession receiver, that whole thing. I guess you could talk to me about Marquise Lee being on the team, but I'm not counting.
Well, as I think we're talking about as one of these complimentary guys.
I'm talking about him as maybe like a depth piece that if somebody gets hurt, they at least have somebody serviceable to fill in. I'm not talking about him as a top 3 receiver for the Patriots. No way.
I mean, but you're in talk. I guess, yeah, Aguilar is probably above him. I'm trying to pull up the stat comparison here. I mean,
at this stage, I mean, Marcus Lee's been hurt for a while. So
right, and that's the issue.
Nelson Aguilar is definitely a better football player.
I guess. Or go ahead on to the next one.
While you're pulling that up, let's talk about a little bit about N'Keal Harry. The rumor obviously is out there that N'Keal Harry is on the trade block. This trade has been floated out there. Who was it? I think it was Beetle, Mark Bertrand, that had it first. That kind of came up with this idea. He's a UMass guy, so I think he's got some Andy Isabella love. I loved Andy Isabella in the draft. He hasn't really panned out in Arizona, but he is a unique player, and he reminds me a lot of Scotty Miller on the Bucks. He is not your typical shifty Edelman, Welker slot guy, right? He's a vertical threat. He's a guy that can really run. He's undersized, and that's been the biggest issue for him is that guys have been able to wear him down. They've been able to get in his face and push him off the line of scrimmage and reroute him, and he hasn't been able to get off press coverage. But if they want speed and they want to get something at, kind of make a move for Harry here, he can at least run. He definitely can fly.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. Supposedly Arizona really likes N'Keal Harry, and that's where you're going to get the most value for him.
They like those types of guys. They're big on Hakeem Butler a couple of years ago. Those are the types of guys that they send.
I liked Hakeem Butler for the Patriots last year. I wanted them to sign him before the year.
Yeah.
Can you maybe bait and switch? Because I saw Mike Reese throw out Christian Kirk in a N'Keal Harry trade.
That's a good one too. I just don't know why Arizona's trading Christian Kirk. I don't know why they're trading Andy Isabella either for N'Keal Harry. I can't. I think they're trading Andy Isabella because his skill set does not fit what they wanted. They want to be a vertical air raid passing offense. And they thought that he would fit there because he's so fast, but because he's wearing coverage at the line of scrimmage, it's really slowing him down a whole lot. And I think that they probably feel like N'Keal can be that big body contested guy. Maybe. I'm not saying that they definitely want to make this trade. I'm saying that's what they can maybe talk themselves into, right? Is that he can be a big body presence, but at the same time, they have DeAndre Hopkins, who's one of the better contested guys in the league. So I don't really know how much they're missing that from their offense.
Yeah, I don't, and I've never been a big Andy Isabella guy. I think he's an upgrade over N'Keal. I'll float the one I floated the other day. I think you offered N'Keal in a fourth to Baltimore for Hollywood Brown and see if they bite on that or something like that, because they need that big body, big catch radius receiver. Hollywood Brown is not a fit. I know that everybody thinks of them as just the speed demon offense. They missed Hayden Hurst last year.
They need a guy that can go up and get it because Lamar Jackson's not he's not a precision passer. Right. So they need somebody there that can go up and get the football for him. And maybe you can commit. Baltimore, there's a couple of teams. Baltimore is one of them that's in the running along with the Patriots for the worst receiving core in the league. Baltimore's up there. They were pretty darn close to being as bad as the Patriots were last year at that spot. They do have Miles Boykin, who's kind of like N'Keal Harry. He's the guy from Notre Dame that has that big body and has that outside ability. So I don't know if they necessarily need him. Can we pour one out?
Hang on.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, but yeah, Michael, that's not happening. His contract.
Let's pour one out for Michael Thomas. He just structured his contract.
One rumor, it was. You want something interesting here? Ben Volen just tweeted this. On Cam Newton's contract, where the Patriots representative signs, that used to be Nick Casario's job. Bill Belichick didn't sign off on the contracts. Nick Casario did.
Yeah.
You want to guess whose name is on there now? With Nick Casario gone?
Robert Kraft.
No.
Dave Ziegler.
Nope.
None of those.
Getting warmer.
I'm getting warmer.
Well, because it's not Robert Kraft. It's somebody who works for Belichick.
Somebody, Berge Nigerian.
No.
Who is it?
Matt Patricia.
Oh, boy.
Do we put, because we've heard about, right? We've heard about the special projects for Matt Patricia. Are we putting any stock into this?
This is gonna stink tomorrow, like they like to say.
I'm just because you were the one who was said, I'm not trying to be hot takey here. I'm just curious, we've talked, because you know what, I'll bring it back to free agency, right? Kenny Golladay doesn't want to. The report was from Albert Breer. Kenny Golladay didn't want to sign with the team he was just with, right? Which we all read as he doesn't like Matt Patricia. He doesn't want to come to New England. Right. So what do we think Patricia's special project is if his name's on the contracts? And is he the one? Like, are they going to have him negotiate with Kenny Golladay?
I really was hoping that Matt Patricia was going to be in the basement somewhere, like
maybe he's in the basement signing contracts and that's his whole job. He's like, what's his name from Office Space?
So is Matt Patricia like making a change to his career path and getting out of coaching and into more like front office stuff? Like, that's what I don't understand is that if it's, it's not,
look, it could mean nothing. I don't think it matters who signs the contract.
Probably not.
I thought that was interesting. I thought I'd share that.
Well, that definitely dampened my mood.
Give us like all right, we need to get back. Give us like a fun football X's and O's roster building something question here. Come on, somebody. Right. Next person to ask a good question, like you're getting it answered right away.
Okay, so
don't copy and paste the Volan tweet.
This is a guy that excites me.
Yes.
I have been banging the table for the Patriots to make an offer sheet that's apparently now going to be signed by Matt Patricia for Tim Patrick from the Denver Broncos. I think a lot of people that don't watch a lot of Broncos football can at least remember Tim Patrick against the Patriots last year, went for 101 yards against the Pats, burned Jason McCourty a couple of times. He's definitely the type of outside receiver, big, explosive, contested catchability, underrated after the catch. I feel like he is your typical X. He's your typical outside guy. The question is, and we'll find this out by the 17th. The question is where is Denver going with that offer sheet in terms of the restricted free agent tender? Are they going to tender him at the second or the first round level, which would mean you'd have to trade a second round pick to Denver to sign Tim Patrick? If that's the case, because so there's a first round tender, there's a second round tender, and there's an original round tender. And Tim Patrick was an undrafted free agent. So the original round tender means they get nothing. They just get right of first refusal. So it's probably going to be that second round level.
And pay attention to that, Patriots fans, what Evan just described, because the same thing applies to J.C. Jackson this year.
Right.
You know what? I would give up a second round pick for Tim Patrick. Because let me ask you this, and it's a good receiver draft, but the receivers that are probably going to be there where the Patriots pick in the second round. I think maybe Kadarius Toney's an early second round pick. We're not counting him here. At 46, is there a better receiver on the board than Tim Patrick? I don't think so. I don't know about you. I don't think so.
More ready-made receiver there, right? That's the biggest question that I have.
There might be guys with higher upside, but Tim Patrick's an NFL player.
And you definitely are not. I do not want anything to do with the Patriots drafting another big-bodied receiver in the NFL draft, right? Like, I want nothing to do with the next.
Go get Jalen Darden. Go get your slot receiver, your Tyreek Hill type. I don't need the big body guy.
Right. So
find that guy. Get a proven guy there.
So if that's what they're looking for in this offseason and they want the guy that can really be a true X and play on the outside, then Tim Patrick's the guy, or somebody like a Corey Davis or Tim Patrick, either one. But I'm not drafting that guy. I'm not drafting Nico Collins. I wouldn't even draft Jamar Chase, to be honest with you. And he's a great prospect, but I would just have concerns about them being able to coach a guy like that. Like, are they going to give him the right coaching?
It's not about you wouldn't have the Patriots take Jamar Chase. It's not about Jamar Chase. It's
right. I would have any other team in the NFL can take Jamar Chase, right? Whenever they want. If they want to take Jamar Chase in the top 10, the Eagles do, or Miami does, I wouldn't say that's a bad move. New England, because they can't develop route running technique and footwork and stuff like that, I'd have a lot of concerns about them taking a guy like Jamar. So Tim Patrick, I love it. Yes. 100%.
Yeah, I think he's a really good player. I think we both said it to each other after that Denver game this year. We both had the same reaction. Like, that's who N'Keal Harry was drafted to be.
Yeah.
Big dude's going to win physically against corners. I love it. Somebody had James White. If not James White, then who? I think this might be this and what's happening with David Andrews' contract are the two most under-talked about storylines facing the Patriots.
Not a whole lot of info out there on either one of those guys either.
Which is, I actually think that's a good thing because we found out today, right? Jason McCourty probably hitting the open market. Adam Butler probably got, which one? I forget which one you had. You had Lawrence Guy, right?
I can throw Dietrich Wise in there as well.
Is probably gone. Are you breaking this right now?
I guess sort of.
All right, I got to write that after we do this. 95thesportshead.com.
All options are on the table for Dietrich Wise right now, which hints to me that he is probably going to hit the open market. I can't confirm 100%, but when someone tells you that all options are on the table, that usually means,
at least they're going to the open market. It doesn't mean they're gone, but they're not getting signed for the deadline. So the only guy I think we heard, Bethel re-signed. We got that concrete. And then I think Mark Daniels had that Cody Davis is expected to resign.
Right.
But that's 5 or 6 guys we hear are going, 1 or 2 guys we hear are staying. So no news to me with David Andrews and James White. Leads me to believe they're staying. Andrews especially because there's been other smoke with James White. We've heard Tampa. We've heard Green Bay, which, by the way, would be great fits, both spots. But that's such an important role on the offense, especially if there is going to be a rookie quarterback in the picture and you want that safety net. And we don't know what's going to happen with Julian Edelman. Like, I think that's huge. We've both ruled out paying Aaron Jones $11 million to fill that role. But they did meet with Demetric Felton this week, running back wide receiver hybrid from UCLA. I think he's somebody Patriots fans, I know really you don't want to hear running back in the draft. Get very excited about Demetric Felton. Yeah. I think CJ Verdell from Oregon is another name to know if they want to, go later, around 6 or 7. He had very similar production in college. CJ Verdell from Oregon did to James White. And then Duke Johnson in free agency is the other one. But I'd like to see them attack that opening if James White leaves. And I would try to keep James White. But if he leaves, I would like to see them attack that opening with some aggressiveness. I think that's an important role. And I know some people think maybe JJ Taylor fills it. I'd like to have more than one option, right? They had Rex Burkhead and James White the last couple years. So JJ Taylor's one, who's the other? Maybe it's DJ Foster they bring back, who's been in Arizona and had kind of a similar role to Burkhead the last couple years, where he was primarily on special teams, played some running back, not quite Rex Burkhead, but I think that's an important role. I'm curious how they're going to fill that role. I think there's options.
Okay, so I want to end on this one. We got to wrap it up, but Malcolm Brown is going to get cut, or I think he did get cut. I think
he got cut like a couple hours ago.
Yeah, that's the report out there. Former Patriot Malcolm Brown, former first-round pick. Oh, wrong one. My computer is going all haywire, so I just won't pull him up. Former first-round pick of the Patriots, Malcolm Brown. You wrote about last week, I mentioned this on our last podcast, about bringing the band back together, right? Bringing all these guys back. Malcolm Brown, Kyle Van Noy, Jimmy Garoppolo, Brandon Cooks. I think Malcolm Brown had an interesting Patriots career because he was a first-round pick. That's a high expectation. He didn't get the 5th-year option. He didn't get re-signed by the team. So they didn't like him for the number that he was at. But now that he's going to come at a little bit of a discount because of New Orleans letting him go, I think it's a different story. I still think that he can be a productive player in the system if we just realize that he's not going to reach a top 32 potential.
Right. And there's been guys that have done that. Patrick Chung was kind of, he wasn't exactly at the ceiling. They let him go. They brought him back. And then, he actually hit that ceiling, oddly enough, right. which I don't think anybody expected. They've done that before. Yeah. I mean, so if you're going to lose Adam Butler and Lawrence Guy and you replace them with Malcolm Brown and like Shelby Harris,
that's the interesting thing.
That's not bad.
Not to cut you off, but today we found out about Adam Butler. We found out a little bit about Lawrence Guy. We found out a little bit about Dietrich Wise just now. The Patriots kind of sound like they're rebuilding their defensive line from scratch right now. 4
of their 5 most used linemen last year: John Simon, Adam Butler, Dietrich Wise, and who am I missing? Lawrence Guy.
Gone.
Those are 4 of their 5 most used linemen. Chase Winovich was second. The rest of them are 1 through 5. They're all pending free agents.
Yeah.
If the Patriots want to rebuild their offensive line, or their defensive line, this is the year to do it. They basically have a clean slate. It's Winovich, it's Byron Cowart, and then I think they signed Carl Davis or Isaiah Mack. One of them they signed to a futures contract. And then Bill Murray, I think, is on a futures contract too. But that's it. So the defensive line was an issue at times last year. One of the worst run defending teams in the league.
Seems like the Patriots took notice.
Yeah, they're in the perfect spot to redo it, and maybe that's what's going to happen. And not a bad thing. Like Lawrence Guy, I love him. He's been a great player, great leader here. He's kind of getting up there. You saw the injuries taking their toll last year. You bring in Shelby Harris, you kind of reset that clock. You get a younger Lawrence Guy. Malcolm Brown's not a younger Adam Butler, but again, you're just kind of reshuffling, resetting. And then when it comes to John Simon, when it comes to Lawrence Guy replacing them, you get younger where you can.
Yeah, so it does sound like the Patriots might be overhauling their defensive line. It especially doesn't sound like they like the number.
Bo Allen, too. I forgot about that. They do a Bo Allen.
the numbers they're getting back from these negotiations. Lawrence Guy's number, Adam Butler's number, definitely doesn't seem like they want to do it at that number. So what we're getting is a typical Patriots thing where they let those guys go test the market. You come back with your best offer that's on the table. The Patriots can make a decision to match it or not match it, and the player moves on or resigns. So I still think that there's a chance that some of those guys come back. But right now, there's no deal imminent on these players. They're all going to hit the open market. And I think it's a really interesting storyline that the Patriots seem to be rebuilding their defensive line. Alex, we can talk about all this again on Monday. Again, weekly show next week, or daily show, next week, Monday through Friday. We're going to come to you around 7:30 every single night with a recap of the day of free agency. Hopefully we get some breaking news on the air and stuff like that as well.
I mean, it's going to be 7 weekdays in a row. We're doing a show. We did one yesterday, today. I mean, we might as well be doing, should we just start doing a radio show? Would you guys want to hear us talk about the Celtics, the Bruins, Fox? I
don't know if people are ready
this is trending
takes yet. I definitely got a little bit mad in the group chat with Trags the other night about
give me a quick Celtics take before we wrap off. Doesn't have to be explosive. Give me a quick Celtics take.
My quick Celtics take is that Danny Ainge loves his players too much. He is guilty of loving his own players too much. He's done this with Marcus Smart. He's done this with Jaylen Brown. They had an ability to trade for James Harden. They could have had James Harden and Jason Tatum together, and they decided to hold back Jaylen Brown from that trade, and they wouldn't do it. And here we are. Now James Harden's a Brooklyn Net. They have a much better team than the Celtics in Brooklyn all of a sudden because they got 3 guys that are top 10, 15 players in the league, 2 guys that might be top 5 players in Harden and KD. And the Celtics are sitting here with their young guns like the little engine that could. So nothing new in Celtics land, right? Always a little bit short, right? But Danny tried. He tried, Alex. He really did.
I meant something simple, like play Robert Williams more, which they showed 6 blocks last night. But you come with they should have traded Jaylen Brown. Again, if let us know on Twitter. Let us know in the chat if you want to hear us talk.
You look at it and you say, if you really want to win a championship,
I'm not saying you're wrong. I just didn't expect that kind of heat from a throwaway take at the end of the show.
If you want to win a title and you're sitting there and you're saying that we are better off with Jaylen and Jason than Jason and James Harden, then I got news for you, Danny. Get out.
You literally were just like, no, my take's not ready. You're super shy about it. Now you're yelling about trading Jaylen Brown. Shout out Bradley Beal in the chat. That's the move.
About this than I am about anything.
So again, let us know. Let us know on Twitter. Let us know in the chat if you want us to talk. It's Patriots Beat, but maybe we figure it out. Maybe, but we'll see. We'll see.
Or Boston Beat all of a sudden.
Maybe with Barth and Lazar. We'll see y'all on Monday though. I think it's going to be a really fun week.
Yes, we will. And we're going to find out a lot of stuff on Monday. I think the market's really going to start to set itself on Monday. So we will be back again every single day next week. So come and join us then. Thanks so much for hanging out with us, guys. I mean, we pushed an hour and 35 minutes and all of you stayed and hanged out with us. We really appreciate it. And we will see you guys next week.